Imagine this. I come home, heart heavy, from a day filled with nothing but routine, nothing new, nothing exciting, just the same old, same old. I step through the door, take off my coat, and immediately feel something's off. It's not in the air, but it's in the silence, the kind of silence that feels thick, like something's missing, something that I can't quite put my finger on. Then my phone buzzes, a notification. I hesitate for a moment, knowing I probably shouldn't look, but I do anyway. And there it is, a message, a secret, a betrayal that crashes through my chest like a tidal wave, knocking the air out of me. I didn't expect it. I didn't even know to look for it, but here it is, right in front of me. How could I not have seen it? How could I have missed the signs the person I trusted most in the world, the one person I believed would never hurt me, was betraying me? My heart races as I stand frozen in the doorway, feeling like the ground beneath me has disappeared. What now? Do I confront him, face the truth that's staring at me through the screen of my phone? Or do I pretend I didn't see it? Pretend everything's fine, and go on with life like I've been doing for years? But then a thought hits me. What if the pain I'm feeling isn't just about this one betrayal? What if it's not just about him or the lies or the secret he's been hiding? What if the real wound goes deeper, something I've been too afraid to face? Something about my marriage, the life I thought I had, the life I thought I was happy with, isn't what I thought it was at all. That's when it hit me. In my search for something real, for love, for meaning, I didn't just find someone else. I found a reflection of everything that was missing in my own life. The emptiness I'd been living with for so long suddenly made sense. I didn't know where to place that pain. Was it his fault? Or was I just as guilty for staying in a marriage that had become a shadow of what I'd hoped for? So here I am. This is my story. A story of betrayal, yes, but also a story of self-discovery, of facing the truth about my own life, my own heart, and the choices I've made. And let me tell you, it's not just about the affair. It's about looking into the mirror and realizing how far I drifted from the person I thought I was. It's about discovering what happens when you're forced to face what you've been running from and what you've been missing all along. This isn't just about pain, it's about redemption, and about the choices we make when staying in a place that no longer serves us feels like it's too much to bear. This is the moment when love hurts and everything changes. Before we dive deeper into this story today, titled When Love Hurts, How an Affair Became My Escape from an Unhappy Marriage, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this journey, and give this video thumbs up. Your support energizes for sharing these intimate stories, and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. Consider this scenario. You wake up every morning next to the person you've promised to love forever. You tell yourself things are fine, that the quiet moments between you are just part of life, part of the comfort you've built. And yet, somewhere deep inside, you feel a quiet ache, something missing, a gap you can't fill no matter how hard you try. For years, I thought I had it all. Love, stability, family, a future that seemed so secure. We were supposed to grow old together, you know? But there was a slow, creeping feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't obvious at first. At first it was small, just a nagging sense that maybe this wasn't how it was meant to be. Then, one day, it became undeniable. The passion we once shared had faded, leaving behind a cold silence between us, the kind of silence that fills the space in your home, your heart, your mind. I remember the first time I really noticed it. My husband and I sitting across from each other at dinner. There was no laughter, no conversation, just the clink of silverware and the dull hum of the refrigerator. And I realized something then. I was invisible. Invisible in my own marriage. And no matter how much I tried to fill the silence, no matter how much love I gave, it never seemed to reach him. Have you ever felt like that? Like you were giving everything you had, but something inside of you was still empty. Like you were giving your love to someone who wasn't even there to receive it. It's a lonely feeling, and that's what I had been living with for so long. A quiet loneliness, a longing for something more, something deeper. And then the unthinkable happened. When I found out about the affair, it wasn't just about the betrayal. No, it was the confirmation of everything I had been feeling but never said aloud. The emptiness I had carried for so long. The silence that had grown between us like a wall, slowly suffocating any hope that things could change. It wasn't just that my husband had stepped outside of our marriage, it was that I had been invisible to him for years and he hadn't even noticed. It was like a punch in the gut. I had spent so long trying to make things work, trying to get him to see me, to really see me, and yet here I was, finding out that everything I feared was true, and let me tell you, it hurt. It hurt in a way I couldn't even explain, not just because of the affair, but because it made everything that had been wrong in my marriage so painfully clear. I had been searching for love, for attention, for something that would make me feel seen and valued. And instead of finding that in my own home, I found it somewhere else. I know this might sound familiar to some of you. Maybe you felt that same emptiness, that longing for something you can't quite name. Maybe you've been there, giving so much of yourself to someone who's never truly looking at you, never truly seeing you for who you are. And it makes you wonder, where did I go wrong? How did I end up here? I can tell you this. Finding out about the affair didn't fix anything. It didn't fill that empty space inside of me. In fact, it only made things worse. It confirmed the loneliness I had been living with, but it didn't take it away. And that's where my story begins. Because what do you do when you realize the person you thought you'd spend forever with has been blind to you all along? What do you do when you realize the marriage you've been fighting for has already faded away and you're the last one to see it? It's a painful realization, one I wish I hadn't had to face, but in the end it was the truth I needed to confront. About my marriage, about myself, and about what happens when we stop seeing the people we love. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. It was late one evening, after another one of our long, painful silences. My husband and I had just finished yet another fight. About nothing, really. It didn't matter any more what we argued about. The words lost their meaning. It was the same pattern over and over. I'd try to talk, he'd shut me out, and we'd both retreat into our separate worlds. I remember the weight of that silence as I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, staring at the cold dinner table. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I felt like I was disappearing, fading away into a life that no longer made sense. I needed to get out. I needed to breathe. So I did what I had never done before. I walked away from it all. That's when I met him. It wasn't anything dramatic at first. We met at a local cafe, a place I often went to when I needed to clear my head. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't trying to replace what was missing in my marriage. It was just a conversation. He was kind, funny, and more than anything, He listened. No one else had really listened to me in a long time. The way he seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say made me feel, well, seen. In that moment, I didn't feel invisible. I felt heard, and that small connection was all it took to draw me in. At first it felt harmless. We exchanged casual texts, shared small talk, and every time I saw him, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. He wasn't my husband. He wasn't trying to fix me or make me feel better. He was just there, and in those moments, I was able to forget about the emptiness that had been building in my marriage for years. But then, something shifted. As the days went by, our conversations grew deeper. I told him things I hadn't told anyone, not even my best friend. About my marriage, about the loneliness, about the way I had felt invisible for so long. He didn't judge me. He just listened, and somehow that was enough. But with each moment of connection, I started to feel something else, a deep, gnawing guilt. I couldn't stop thinking about my husband. I felt like I was betraying him, even though he hadn't given me any reason to believe he was truly present in our marriage anymore. But then I thought, was I just using him as an escape? Was I looking for a way out because I was too scared to face the real problem? That I wasn't happy, and maybe hadn't been for a long time. And then came the hardest part. Was I just a victim in this? Or was I complicit in my own betrayal? I remember the first time I kissed him. The guilt hit me like a wave, but it didn't stop me. It felt so, right in that moment. The feeling of being wanted, being seen. It was like nothing I had experienced in years. I could breathe again. I could feel. But in the back of my mind, the question swirled. Was this all a result of my own unhappiness? Was I looking for someone else to fill the space that my husband had left behind? Or had I crossed a line that I couldn't come back from? The emotional tug-of-war inside me was unbearable. One moment, I felt alive, seen, and understood. In the next, I was drowning in guilt. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I was doing something wrong. But I couldn't deny how much better it felt to be with him. The way he made me feel, like I was worth something, worth him. It was intoxicating. But with that intoxication came shame. The shame of what I was doing. The fear of what it would mean if anyone found out. But more than that, I was scared of what it meant for me. What kind of person had I become? Was I just as lost as my marriage? Was I seeking approval from someone else because I couldn't find it at home? It was a struggle that I couldn't escape. The more I tried to push away the guilt, the more it came rushing back. But every time I looked into his eyes, every time he made me feel like I mattered, the guilt felt a little smaller. I didn't know where this was going, and I didn't know if it was going to lead to anything more than just another distraction, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the affair wasn't just about him. It was about me. It was about me finding something I thought I had lost, myself. It wasn't just about escaping my marriage anymore. It was about feeling alive again, feeling something other than the numbness I had been living in for so long. But was I willing to pay the price for that? What would happen if I followed this path any further? I couldn't answer that. I didn't know how it would end. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. While I was wrestling with my emotions, I couldn't help but wonder, what was really driving me to keep going down this path? Was I just seeking comfort in someone else, or was there something deeper at play? I needed answers, and that's when I started doing what I do best, researching. And what I discovered through articles, therapy sessions, and conversations with others, was this: infidelity, more often than not, starts not as a physical act of betrayal, but as an emotional escape. Experts say that it's the desire for emotional connection that leads many people down this road. And it makes sense, doesn't it? When you feel invisible in your own life, when you're neglected or emotionally starved, seeking out that connection elsewhere can feel like a lifeline. In my case, that's exactly what happened. My marriage had become a routine, a series of small, unresolved issues piling up over the years. We'd go through the motions, but there was no intimacy anymore, no real communication. I started to feel like I was just going through the motions. Sure, we had the occasional argument, but the real problem wasn't the fights. It was the quiet, the silence. It was the long stretches of time when we weren't talking at all. And in that silence, I began to notice the absence of affection, understanding, and even interest in each other's lives. My husband seemed distant, wrapped up in his own world, while I was left to fill the emotional void that had been growing between us for years. That's when I turned to him. Someone who, at first, seemed like a safe, harmless outlet. He didn't expect anything from me. He just listened. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone cared. This isn't unique to me. In fact, studies show that over 40% of marriages experience infidelity at some point. But what's often overlooked is the emotional neglect that precedes it. A lot of times, it's not the physical act of cheating that causes the rift. It's the emotional disconnection that builds up long before that. Psychologists point out that when we're not getting the emotional support we need from our partner, it creates a void, and that void can be incredibly painful. It's not about finding someone else to replace your partner. Often, it's about trying to fill that void with someone who makes you feel something. Anyone who can make you feel noticed, heard, important. This void doesn't always come from a single event. In my case, it was the accumulation of years of silent disappointment, of feeling like I was invisible, like I was just a fixture in my own home. My husband wasn't a bad person, and I wasn't a bad wife. We just got lost in our own lives, so wrapped up in the pressures of life, work, and raising kids, that we forgot how to be a couple, how to see each other. But what I found was that while seeking someone else to fill that gap might bring temporary relief, it only deepens the pain in the long run. The guilt, the shame, the constant questioning of whether you've crossed a line that can never be uncrossed, it all weighs on you. The truth is, the emotional connection I'd been craving from my husband wasn't something I could find in someone else. The healing, the change, had to start with me and with us, as a couple. And that's where the real heartbreak comes in. It's realizing that seeking someone else for solace didn't solve anything. It just added more layers of hurt. So, what does that mean for us? Is there hope after emotional neglect, after infidelity? Can a marriage survive when the emotional trust has been broken? Well, studies also show that healing after infidelity is possible, but it takes a lot of work. It takes vulnerability, courage, and a willingness to confront the truth, not just about your partner, but about yourself. If you're both willing to do the work, then yes, rebuilding trust is possible, but it takes time. It's not about forgetting what happened or pretending that things will go back to the way they were. It's about acknowledging the hurt, the disappointment, and finding a way forward together. What I learned through all of this is that emotional neglect doesn't have to be the end of the road for a relationship. It doesn't mean that everything is lost. It just means that something needs to change, That if we want to rebuild what we once had, we need to put in the effort to reconnect emotionally. But that's not easy. It wasn't easy for me to face the truth about what had happened, and it wasn't easy for my husband to face the fact that I had sought comfort elsewhere. But maybe, just maybe, it was the wake-up call we both needed. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. The first step towards healing didn't come easily. In fact, it felt like an insurmountable mountain. But as I sat there in therapy, listening to my therapist's gentle voice, I realized something. I wasn't broken because of my marriage. I was broken because I had forgotten who I was. For so long, I had wrapped myself up in my role as a wife and mother that I had neglected the person I used to be. The woman who had dreams, passions, and a life beyond family obligations. And I began to see the truth. This affair wasn't the cause of my pain. It was the result of years of neglect. Neglect not just from my husband, but from myself. I had abandoned my own needs, my own desires, in the hope that somehow things would magically get better on their own. At first, therapy was hard. The sessions were filled with uncomfortable silences as I wrestled with the emotions I had pushed down for so long. I couldn't even say the word affair without feeling like a weight was crushing my chest. But, little by little, those walls I had built up around my pain began to crack. My therapist helped me understand that healing wasn't about just fixing my marriage. It was about confronting the parts of myself I had buried, the parts that were hungry for love, for attention, for care. Through therapy, I learned to let go of the guilt that had been eating at me. I understood that I wasn't a bad person, but that I had made choices from a place of deep pain, not malice. And slowly, I began to forgive myself. I had to, because if I didn't, I would never find peace. But forgiving myself wasn't enough. I needed to face the truth about my marriage. I needed to realize that the affair wasn't the solution to my problems. It was just a temporary escape, a distraction from the bigger issues that had been festering for years. My husband wasn't the enemy. I wasn't the enemy. We had both gotten lost in the chaos of life, and the affair was just a reflection of that lostness. There were days when I wanted to give up. Days when the shame would creep back in, when I would question whether I even deserved to heal. But on the good days, I started to feel something else. Hope. I began to rediscover the strength I had forgotten I had. It wasn't about running away from the pain anymore. It was about standing up to it. I started doing things for myself again, small things at first. I read books I had forgotten about. I took walks by myself, with no agenda, no rush. I spent time with friends, and I learned to enjoy my own company. It felt like I was learning to breathe again after years of suffocating. But it wasn't just about me anymore. I also needed to face my husband and ask the hard questions. Did I still love him? Could we rebuild our trust? Could he forgive me? And, more importantly, could I forgive him? One of the hardest things I had to do was admit that the marriage wasn't just his fault. It was mine too. The cracks had been there long before the affair happened. We had both been neglectful in our own ways. But understanding that allowed me to stop blaming him entirely. Instead, I began to focus on what we both needed to do to fix things. Whether that meant rebuilding our relationship, or, perhaps, walking away from it entirely. There were no easy answers. There were days when I wanted to call it quits, when I felt like I couldn't go on, but then I'd look back at the progress I'd made, at the woman I was becoming. I knew I had to keep going, not just for him, but for me. The journey to healing was messy and uncertain, but it was also full of moments of clarity. I began to understand that healing doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. Some days you feel like you're moving forward, and others you feel like you're sliding backward. But each day, no matter how small the step, was progress. Eventually, I came to realize something else, that forgiveness wasn't just for him, it was for me too. Forgiving him for the things that had hurt me, and forgiving myself for the choices I made out of desperation. I couldn't move forward without both. And that's when I found peace, not in the absence of pain, but in the acceptance of it. I understood that I didn't need to have all the answers. I didn't need to know what the future held for my marriage. I just needed to take care of myself first. And from there, the rest would fall into place. I can't say for sure where my marriage will go. I can't predict what the future holds. But I can tell you that I am no longer the woman who was drowning in guilt and shame. I am no longer the woman who was looking for someone else to fill the emptiness inside me. I'm learning to fill that emptiness on my own. And that, I think, is the most important lesson of all. Healing isn't linear, it isn't clean, it's full of messiness, confusion and pain, but it's also full of hope, growth, and the possibility of a new beginning. And even though I can't say what comes next for my marriage, I know that I will be okay, because I've learned how to be okay with me. Click subscribe, and remember to turn on notifications, so you won't miss any future episodes. If you've ever been in a situation where you felt betrayed, whether by your partner, a friend, or even by yourself, remember this. Healing starts with self-love. Self-compassion. It starts by allowing yourself the space to feel the pain without judgment, without trying to bury it or deny it. If your relationship is broken, it's okay to take time for you. It's okay to step back, breathe, and let the truth of what's happening sink in before you decide what to do next. I know because I've been there, and I wish I had known this sooner. Healing isn't about fixing the other person. You can't fix someone else's mistakes, their betrayals, their actions. The only thing you have control over is your own healing process. And it's hard. It's messy. Sometimes it feels like you're unraveling, like the pieces of your life and your heart are scattered everywhere. But I promise you this, those pieces can be put back together in time. If you're going through something like this, whether it's betrayal, emotional neglect, or just feeling stuck in a relationship, remember, you are worthy of happiness. You deserve love, you deserve respect, and you deserve to feel seen. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to fix everything around us that we forget to take care of ourselves first. Take a step back. Let yourself grieve. Let yourself feel anger, frustration, sadness. Let yourself heal in your own way. And know that in the end, healing is not about getting over the hurt. It's about learning to live with it and letting it teach you something about who you are and what you need moving forward. The journey of healing isn't easy. There's no clear roadmap, no perfect way to do it. But one thing I've learned is that the path to healing is necessary. It's a path of growth, reflection, and ultimately transformation. When you face your pain, when you allow yourself to sit with it, that's when you start to understand who you are, what you want, and what you need from your relationships and from yourself. I'm sure some of you can relate to this. Maybe you've been through the heartache of betrayal, or maybe you've struggled with emotional emptiness that led you to make choices you later regretted. But what I want you to remember is this: you're not alone. I may not know exactly what you're going through, but I do know this. It's okay to feel broken. It's okay to be lost. The important thing is that you choose to heal. So, let's talk. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation where you felt betrayed or lost in your relationship? How did you cope with that emotional weight? What steps did you take to start healing? Or, if you're in the midst of it right now, what are you learning about yourself through this experience? I'd love to hear your stories. Please share them with me in the comments. Let's create a space where we can support each other, where we can reflect on our journeys and learn from each other's experiences. Your story matters. You matter. Click subscribe and remember to turn on notifications so you won't miss any future episodes. Thank you for being a part of Emily's journey today. Sharing her story wasn't easy for her, but it was a step towards healing, not just for her, but for anyone who can relate to the struggles of betrayal, emotional emptiness, and finding your way back to yourself. And whether you're at the beginning of that journey or somewhere in the middle, remember, you are not alone. Everyone has their own struggles. Some are quiet, hidden deep within, while others might be more visible on the surface. But no matter what you're going through, we're all in this together. Healing is personal, but it's also universal. We all face challenges, and through shared stories, empathy, and support, we can find a path forward. So, as you reflect on your own journey, whether you've experienced something like Emily's story or you're facing different challenges in your relationships, know this: healing is possible. It may not be quick, and it may not always be easy, but with time, self-compassion, and the courage to confront your own emotions, you will find peace. It's a road that requires patience and grace, but it's one worth walking. And before we end, if you found this video helpful, be sure to check out our next video. We'll be diving deeper into the topic of rebuilding trust after betrayal. It's a tough road, but trust me, it is possible. If Emily's story resonated with you, I know you'll find this next video just as meaningful. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button and share this video with anyone who might need to hear these words today. Let's continue this journey of healing and growth together, one step at a time. Your voice matters. Your healing matters, and we're all here to support one another. Thank you for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, no matter where you are in your journey, there's always hope.